Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Professors of Profit Vlogcast. I'm Dr. F Scott Feil, and I'm with today Dr. Kate Lapak. We have an interesting side hustle, side gig to talk about today, so I'm really excited. Kate, if you wouldn't mind, tell my audience a little bit about your background, and you're coming all the way from lovely Hawaii too, so I appreciate that. Tell
Yes.
us about what led you to where you're at today.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. My name's Kate. I currently work in Kailua Kona, Hawaii, which is on the Big Island. If people are familiar with the different islands of Hawaii, I went to school at Washington University in St. Louis, where I got my DPT, my Doctorate of Physical Therapy, in 2018. I ended up moving out to Hawaii just after graduating, as I had an internship during school out here, which came with a job opportunity. So I've been out here for about 3.5 years now, doing mostly outpatient physical therapy.
Yeah, that's awesome. I did a little bit of a home health stint out there in Hawaii for about 5.5 months or so. Loved it. I was in downtown Honolulu, and I kind of drove all the way around Oahu all day, every day. So one of the things that I want to talk about a little bit here on this interesting side gig and side hustle, and is how this can actually work, especially in bigger cities. So tell everybody a little bit about what you like to do as a side hustle here. So full-time physical therapist and part-time dog walker, dog sitter. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I use the app Rover. It's an app where people can find dog sitters and dog walkers. And I also sometimes watch people's cats, not as often as dogs, but I started out doing it actually while I was in grad school for a little bit of extra cash. And it was something that carried over no matter where I was. So when I went off to my internships, people could find me on there just based on location. And so when I first moved out to Hawaii, it actually wasn't very popular, and still kind of is under the radar a little bit. But one thing that I noticed when I moved here to Hawaii is that, especially on the island that I live on in Kona, there are maybe 2 places for people to board their dogs. And when people leave the island to go on vacation, it's usually for, an extended period of time.
Yeah.
And so it created kind of this unique opportunity, especially once people started realizing that there was something else out there to get people to watch their dogs or walk their dogs. That I realized that having a dog of my own, it was really valuable out here. So.
Yeah, I think, in big cities especially, right? I think in home health settings for sure. And, even if you've got your own practice, like I had a mobile practice, right? And in a bigger city, you could just schedule your dog walking and your dog sitting in amongst your home health patients. I could see that very easily working in Honolulu downtown where I worked. But even bigger cities like New York, where I'm from originally, or Chicago, or some of the bigger California metro cities, Dallas, Austin, the whole, anywhere where there's a lot of people in a small amount of room, or small area of space, you can kind of weave in some of those dog walking jobs and dog sitting jobs in amongst your patient care, and
Yeah.
depending on what setting you're in, I could easily see that being a really good fit. And a lot of the side gigs and side hustles that we talk about kind of keep one foot in the healthcare boat still. This one kind of goes outside of that a little bit, but I could see it still remaining in the healthcare field if you specifically marketed to a lot of med students, or PT students, or healthcare students, nursing students, right? If you kind of spread amongst that community, especially locally, you put out in the Facebook groups there, like, hey, I'm a physical therapist, but I also, do dog walking and dog sitting. Should you need those services? So there's that one way to kind of keep that one foot in the healthcare boat, I think. But then, like you said, it's just a very opportunistic thing at times where if there's not many options, you can kind of command your own price at that point. You become one of the few options available. So it really is a lucrative kind of gig, depending on where you're at, the setting you're at, and the location. What are some things that you would say as far as like somebody looking to get into dog walking or dog sitting? What are some tips or ideas or pointers that you would say for somebody that's maybe just starting out? Like Rover's an app I didn't even know about. And we're seeing a lot of this Uber of massages or Uber of physical therapy, or now Rover seems to be kind of like the Uber of dog walking. Like, what are some tips that you would give to people just starting out?
So usually, I mean, when I first started out, it was a lot of like friends of family, friends of friends who needed, someone to watch their dogs while they're on vacation. And it was just something that I started doing that way. There are multiple apps out there. I've only been on Rover, but a lot of people actually will find me on Rover and then, down the line be like, hey, I want to set something up where this is repetitive.
Yeah.
And, there are some like legal ramifications there that you have to be careful of when you are a member of Rover and then are accepting, clients outside of it. But a lot of it is, for me, was at least word of mouth. And so here as well, like once I started seeing patients, and I had a couple patients figure out that I was doing it on the side, and they were like, oh, I'm going to tell this person and this person. And so it's just one of those things where it's needed, and people don't usually think about it all that much until they need it, right? And so if you have someone that that can come watch like your beloved pet, like it's something that people really are appreciative of.
Yeah. I can think of a handful of patients, even years ago when I did the home health gig there in Hawaii, that needed pet sitting while they either went in for surgery or whatever it may be, or were rehabbing at the skilled nursing facility before they got back home. I can already think of a handful of patients that would have needed it too. So, like you said, our patient base is a great place to spread that word of mouth as well. So again, still kind of keeping that one foot in the healthcare boat, and it's a great way to kind of grow that business. And at the end of the day, it's just kind of fun, like I was never really an animal guy. I didn't have any pets or anything growing up. I loved animals, but just not my animals. Other people's animals were great, and then I got married, and kind of a package deal. It came with a Chihuahua and a cat, and it just kind of kept growing from there. So now we've got the Chihuahua and two new cats that came after the last cat we had. So the petting zoo keeps growing now, and it's not by choice. It just kind of happened, but I love the fur babies, and I think especially when I was doing home health, I used to love everybody's pets. I loved going in and seeing them, and them greeting me as I got there. Never had any issues, knock on wood. But it's a fun side gig. It's a fun side hustle, I think, to where people, especially if you love animals, it's just a great little job to have on the side, and it's a great way to make a little bit of money on the side. What would you say is like an expert tip or an expert hack at this point that you've learned that really, you wish you knew when you were getting going? Like what's some of the expert knowledge that you can drop on the audience to let them know how to get this thing up and rolling and really gaining momentum?
Yeah. So when I first started, I wasn't really sure what to charge. When you first start out on any sort of side gig, it's interesting to try and gauge, okay, what are people willing to pay
Right.
for this, right? And so when I first started, I was like, okay, let me compare to the boarding facilities to, these other places, and I'll offer a step cheaper. So then people will pick me over them. But then, it came to me that there's so much demand for it, and
Yeah.
I'm doing them a favor by either going to their house and staying with their pet, or their pet gets to stay in the comfort of their home while their owners are away. That it was like, okay, like that's not exactly how I would have
Yeah.
thought about it at the beginning versus now, where people, there's a need for it and people are willing to pay for it. And just kind of don't be afraid to ask for what you want or ask for what you need.
Yeah, that's great. I think, especially as the demand increases, you realize that your value and your worth is way more than worrying about undercutting for the low ball price. You really find that people will pay it, and there's a large community of physical therapists that treat canines and cats and animals, but mostly canine, some equestrian as well. But I find that a lot of them obviously are cash pay because they don't really take insurance for pet therapy, even though there is certified, canine rehab therapists. But that could be a service that they could offer too on the side, even if they're not the ones doing it, right? Maybe they're hiring out techs or aides to then do that portion of the business. I can easily see this, side gig turning into a full-time gig eventually, or at least another revenue generation if you started hiring on some like 1099s or something. It really could balloon up into something wild and crazy if you really wanted to focus on it. So take it for what it's worth. Do it as a side gig and a side hustle and a love for fur babies if you like, or turn it into something full time if you really want to dive into it, and that's your MO. So, well, Kate, I can't thank you enough for coming on and chatting with us today about this side gig and side hustle. I think it's a great opportunity for people, especially in some of the larger cities, or even in some of the not so large cities where the demand is high. Where can people reach out to you if they have follow-up questions or they just want to check in and see what you're up to these days on the beautiful big island of Hawaii there?
So I'm pretty active on Twitter. So my Twitter handle is at Kate Lapak, KATELAPAK. You can also reach out to me via email, which I'm sure can be provided, but it's also just my name at gmail.com.
Yep. And we'll put all those links in the show notes so everybody can get you very easily. Kate, thanks so much for your time and for educating my audience on another eventful side hustle and side gig. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.